A road trip across the United States, something we had talked about for years but never actually planned until now. There were 5 of us: me, Alex, Ryan, Jess, and Claire. We had been best friends since college, and now in our late 20s, we finally had the time and money to make it happen. A 2-week journey through some of the most scenic places in the country: coastal highways, national parks, small-town diners. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. We started in California, making our way up the Pacific Coast Highway before heading inland toward the Rocky Mountains. Everything felt like an adventure. Blasting music in the car, laughing over terrible gas station coffee, arguing over who had the worst singing voice. By the time we reached Utah, we were exhausted but happy. We had planned to stay in a small town for the night before heading to one of the national parks in the morning. The place was quiet, almost too quiet, but we chalked it up to being off-season for tourists. None of us had any idea that this was where everything would change. The town itself looked like something out of an old Western movie. Dusty roads, a few gas stations, and one diner that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. We checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts, the kind with flickering neon signs and a front desk clerk who barely looked up from his newspaper as we arrived. After dropping our bags in the room, we headed to the diner for a late dinner. The place was nearly empty, except for a few locals at the counter. The waitress was friendly enough, but there was something about the way she looked at us, like she wanted to warn us about something, but wasn't sure if she should. "You guys passing through?" she asked while refilling our coffee. "Yeah," I said. "Just stopping for the night before we head to the park tomorrow." She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Not much happens around here," she said. "Just be careful." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I didn't ask. After dinner, we decided to stretch our legs and walk around before heading back to the motel. The town was mostly shut down for the night, but we could see a few lights in shop windows, the occasional silhouette moving behind curtains. That's when Claire noticed him. A man standing near the gas station, partially hidden in the shadows. He was tall, wearing a worn-out jacket and staring directly at us. Not in a casual way, a fixed, unblinking stare. "Do you guys see that?" Claire whispered, gripping my arm. I followed her gaze and felt a chill run down my spine. The man wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching. "Maybe he's just a local," Alex suggested, but his voice lacked confidence. We turned away, walking faster back toward the motel. I glanced over my shoulder once more. He was still there. That night, none of us slept well. The motel room was stuffy, and every little noise outside made me tense up. Around 2 a.m., Claire woke us up. "There's someone outside," she whispered. I sat up instantly. She was by the window, peeking through the curtains. I joined her, heart pounding. At first, I saw nothing. Then, just beyond the streetlight's glow, I spotted him. The same man from earlier. He wasn't close, but he was there, standing near the edge of the parking lot. "Okay, that's not normal," Ryan said, now fully awake. "Should we call the cops?" Alex hesitated. "For what? He hasn't done anything illegal." "Yet," Claire muttered. We watched for another few minutes, but eventually, the man turned and walked away. Still, the unease lingered. The next morning, we tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just some harmless drifter. Maybe we were overreacting. But as we packed up and prepared to leave town, we realized something was wrong. Claire was gone. Her bag was still in the room, her phone was charging, but she wasn't anywhere inside the motel. Panic set in fast. We searched the parking lot, the diner, even knocked on doors of nearby rooms. Nothing. Then, Ryan found her phone, on the ground near the gas station. We split up, running through the town, shouting her name. The few people we saw just shook their heads, saying they hadn't noticed anything unusual. Then, Jess spotted something. A car, an old, rusty pickup, pulling out from an alleyway. And in the passenger seat, just for a split second, I saw her. Claire. She looked terrified. We ran after it, but it was useless. The truck sped off, disappearing down the highway. We didn't think, we just acted. Jumping into our car, we tore down the road, following the direction the truck had gone. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. Who was this guy? Where was he taking her? Then, up ahead, we saw it. The truck had turned onto an old dirt road leading into the woods. We didn't hesitate. I slammed on the brakes, and we jumped out, running after the truck. It had stopped near a rundown cabin. The driver, a man in his 50s with a rough, weathered face, was pulling Claire from the truck. She was fighting, kicking, screaming. "Let her go!" Ryan shouted. The man looked up, startled. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, seeing that he was outnumbered, he shoved Claire to the ground and bolted toward the trees. Ryan chased after him, but the man disappeared into the forest. Claire was shaken, but unharmed. She told us the man had approached her outside the motel that morning, pretending to ask for directions. Before she knew it, he had grabbed her and shoved her into his truck. We drove straight to the nearest police station, still shaking with adrenaline. The officers took our statements, but we knew the truth. He was gone. A week later, we got a call from the police. They had found the truck abandoned in another town, but the man had vanished. Just like that. To this day, we don't know who he was or what he wanted. Maybe it was robbery. Maybe it was something worse. All I know is that if we hadn't seen that truck in time, if we had waited just a few minutes longer, we might have never seen Claire again. Family vacations were supposed to be about relaxation, about escaping the routine and making memories. This trip was meant to be just that. A week in a quiet coastal town in California, away from the chaos of city life. Just me, my wife Rachel, and our 2 kids, Lucas and Emily. We had booked a rental house just a few blocks from the beach, a cozy 2-bedroom with a small front porch and a backyard that overlooked the dunes. It wasn't luxurious, but it was perfect. The town itself was small, charming, filled with local shops, seafood restaurants, and barely any tourists. Exactly what we were looking for. Our first day was all about getting settled. The moment we arrived, the kids rushed inside to claim their rooms, their laughter echoing through the house. Rachel unpacked the essentials, while I made a quick trip to a small grocery store down the road, stocking up on snacks and breakfast items. The town had a relaxed, old-fashioned charm. People strolled lazily along the sidewalks, greeting one another. The air smelled like salt and fresh bread from a nearby bakery. It felt like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. That evening, we took a walk down to the beach. The sky burned with the colors of sunset, casting a golden shimmer across the water. Lucas and Emily ran ahead, their footprints sinking into the wet sand as they chased the retreating waves. Rachel and I trailed behind, our hands intertwined, enjoying the peacefulness. For the first time in months, I felt truly relaxed. The next morning, we explored more of the town. We had breakfast at a tiny cafe that served the best blueberry pancakes I'd ever had. Lucas insisted on getting a souvenir from a little trinket shop, eventually settling on a seashell necklace. Emily, on the other hand, was more interested in the saltwater taffy stand near the boardwalk. We spent the afternoon on the beach. The kids built sandcastles, while Rachel and I took turns fishing off the pier. It was the kind of day that felt timeless, the kind of memory I wanted to hold on to forever. That evening, we dined at a seafood restaurant with tables overlooking the ocean. The warm lights, the sound of the waves, and the soft hum of conversations around us made everything feel surreal, like we had stepped into a postcard. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel and I sat outside on the porch, listening to the waves in the distance. We talked about how nice it was to get away, how we should do trips like this more often. Before heading inside, I walked to the end of the porch and gazed out at the street. Everything was quiet. The houses around us were dark, their occupants already tucked in for the night. The occasional flicker of a street lamp cast long shadows across the pavement. Something about it felt different. Not bad, just quiet in a way that I wasn't used to. I double-checked that the doors were locked before going to bed. The first 2 days went by smoothly. We spent our time at the beach, ate too much ice cream, and wandered through the small streets lined with mom-and-pop stores. Everything was normal, peaceful, until I noticed the man. It was the third afternoon. We had just finished dinner at a cozy seafood restaurant and were walking back to our rental house. The streets were quiet, the kind of silence that only comes in small towns as the last bit of sunlight faded from the sky. The air was warm, carrying the scent of salt from the ocean. That's when I saw him, a man standing near the corner just across from our house. At first, I barely registered him. Maybe he was a local enjoying the evening or a tourist like us. But as we got closer, something about him unsettled me. He wasn't moving, wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't engaged in anything, just standing there. Still, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on us. A tightness formed in my stomach. I glanced at Rachel, but she was too busy fumbling with her purse, searching for the house key. Lucas and Emily ran ahead onto the porch, giggling about something, completely oblivious. As we reached the steps, I stole another glance over my shoulder. He hadn't moved. Rachel finally found the key and pushed the door open. I hesitated before stepping inside. "Did you see that guy?" I asked her quietly. "What guy?" she said, looking up briefly before glancing toward the street. I turned back. He was gone. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I scanned the street again, but it was empty. The soft glow of the streetlights flickered against the pavement, giving everything an eerie stillness. I shook it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe he had simply walked away. But as I locked the door behind me, a nagging feeling settled deep in my chest, one I couldn't quite shake. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every creak of the house, every distant sound from outside made my pulse quicken. I found myself listening, waiting for something, though I wasn't sure what. Around 2 a.m., I got up for a glass of water. As I passed the front window, I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. He was there again, standing further down the street, barely visible under the dim glow of the streetlight. He wasn't looking at the house directly, but his presence was unmistakable. He was waiting. I watched him for a long moment, my fingers tightening around the curtain. I thought about waking Rachel, but decided against it. I wasn't ready to explain why I was so sure this wasn't just some random passerby. And then, without warning, he turned and walked away. Not in a hurry, not as if he had just been caught doing something wrong. Just a slow, deliberate retreat into the darkness. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I couldn't shake the unease. We took the kids to the beach again, trying to act normal, but my eyes were constantly scanning the area, the shops, the parking lots, the faces in the crowd. Then, as we were loading up the car to head back to the rental, I saw him again. This time, he was closer. Standing near the entrance of a side alley, partially hidden in the shadows, his gaze locked onto us. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. I didn't hesitate. I turned to Rachel, my voice steady but firm. "We need to go, now." She saw the urgency in my face and didn't question it. We packed up the car in record time, buckled the kids in, and pulled out onto the road. I checked the rearview mirror. The man was gone. We left the town that evening, cutting our trip short. The kids were confused but didn't argue. Rachel asked me over and over if I was sure it was the same man. I was. I never found out who he was, never knew what he wanted, but something told me that if we had stayed just one more night, I might have found out the hard way, and that was a risk I wasn't willing to take.